Hey everybody, Bree here from the Sewing House, and we are already up to part 4 of the Brave Quilt Along, which I'm really excited about. This is the last step before we really get to put everything together and see how all of the work that we've done comes into this beautiful, beautiful quilt. So today we're working with 4 different fabrics. We've got this, it's got this sort of block print looking design. It's really pretty. The yellow bellflowers on the vines. And then we've got this sort of a border stripe print in the blue and in purple. So those are the 4 we're working with today. The other thing you're gonna need to grab is all the way back in step 1, we cut a whole bunch of these circles out. You're gonna need those today. So we're gonna get started. First thing we're gonna cut is some of this stripe fabric. And I'm gonna show you on the blue just because that's what I have a chunk up here to show you. But it's gonna be, you're gonna start things out exactly the same as you are on this, exactly the same way here as with the purple. I am taking a break from my beloved 12.5-inch square creative grids. I'm using the 6.5 by 24.5 creative grids ruler because these strips need to be 6.5 inches wide, and we're cutting along the whole length of the fabric. So the ruler's already 6.5 and it's a little longer. That's gonna make our lives a whole lot easier. And one of the things about these creative grids rulers that I really like, so you can kind of see here, down the center, in both directions, it's got this white line, and that's the center mark of the ruler, which is really nice. So I can put my stickers on. That's for a different cut we're gonna do later, but I have this white line to know exactly where the center of my ruler is, which is handy for centering these motifs. So I can just lay this on here and get that running roughly down the center of the design. Anna Maria does hand draw her designs, so they're not like super duper precise and even all the time, which is what makes them so fun and beautiful. But so you can see I've got that white line running roughly down the center of that motif, and then I can just cut and I'll slide it up, make sure my white line is centered, and cut and go all the way across the whole length of the fabric. Once I have it cut that direction, make sure you have a sharp rotary cutter. It's gonna make your life a whole lot easier, which is what I did not do today. But once you have it cut that direction, like I've got here, you can turn your fabric around and then just get the edge of your fabric lined up along the edge of your ruler. As you're turning things around, your fabric might shift just a little bit, so you can give it just a tiny, tiny tug. You don't wanna really stretch your fabric out, but just to get it laying the way it was when you made that first cut. And get that edge lined up along the edge of your ruler. That white line should still be about in the center of that motif, right down the middle. And then you can cut this way so that you end up with these 6.5-inch.
Voila, they're
strips.
done.
There they are.
She did that so fast.
I did it so fast. Look at that. So you're gonna do that with both the blue and the purple. You should end up with 3 length of fabric, so that's parallel to your selvage. 3 length of fabric strips from each of those, and your pattern has wonderful instructions on what size to cut them down to. Because you only have 3 strips, but there's 4 sides to a quilt, you are gonna have to piece one of those strips into a longer one. So we're gonna cut them down so you end up with 3 that are 48.5 inches long, and she tells you exactly here where to cut on the motif. And I will show you right here on my little sample strip. There we go. So when you cut on your strip, you need to cut it so you're 2 3/4 of an inch above the motif. So this distance should be about 2 3/4 of an inch. So I'm gonna so 1, 2 3/4 right there. And that is where I'm gonna cut. Then I'll measure from there down to that whole 48.5 inches. This is not 48.5 inches, but you get the idea. So when you cut it at 48.5, this end should also be about 2 3/4, and you can see how they are about the same distance from the end of that motif. And that's gonna keep those centered really well, and it's gonna make piecing things together a whole lot easier. So the one that you do have to piece together, you're going to cut one of the pieces that is 30 inches long. And the top of that one, so you should have three squares in that one. So 1, 2, 3. And again, you've got that 2 3/4 above the motif on the one end. The other piece is gonna be 19 inches long. And that one should only have 2 squares in it. Let's see. So it'd be like this. And you should also have one end that's 2 3/4 from your motif. So you're gonna stitch that the ends that are 2 3/4 apart, or 2 3/4 away from that motif. You're gonna stitch those together, and you'll end up with a strip that is all pieced together, and you won't even be able to see where that seam is. See if I can even find my seam on here, which I can't. That one's a full one. See, this is why we do it this way, so that you can't even find the seam.
There it is, right there.
There. See, and we've kind of covered it up a little bit, but you can see a little through here how that motif, look how well those points match up in that seam allowance, so it just flows all the way up, and you've got this lovely continuous strip. Okay, you're gonna do basically the same thing with the blue. The strips need to be a little bit longer. I'm not gonna go through all that. You can read just as well as I can. It's all in your book, but same idea with that 2 3/4, 2 3/4, that's the end that goes together, and that's what's gonna make things match up really well. We also need to cut some length of fabric strips from this yellow, and these ones have to be 4 1/2. So rather than grabbing a whole nother ruler, which we can help you with if you'd like, but I already had this one out, so I just went ahead and put these blue arrows, remember those arrows that we love so much, put those at 4 1/2 inches. So I'm using the ruler with those black circles right side up. So 4 1/2 inches, and then I just made some marks for what the center line of 4 1/2, so it's 2 1/4. So where that center line is, so I could take the fabric, and the one thing to remember here is that you want to keep the section with the light yellow in the middle, not with the dark yellow. So you should be cutting in the dark yellow. So I've got my ruler turned around. So this is my center line. So I've marked it so I don't have to think about it too much when I'm actually cutting. So I'm just kind of getting that roughly centered up that light yellow so I could cut. And then I can flip it around and get that edge lined up on that 4 1/2. And I cut this direction, and I'll end up with these strips like this that have that yellow centered really nicely down in the middle.
So cute.
I love this fabric. It is just,
No.
oh, and this shade of yellow, it's really, really pretty. So the last bit of cutting we're gonna do is out of this really pretty sort of block print fabric. And it feels a little counterintuitive because we're actually centering the gap between these motifs when we're cutting. So these are gonna be 6 1/2 inch squares. And I think the best way to do this is to open it out to a single layer, and we're gonna take that ruler. Again, this is a 6 1/2 inch wide ruler. We're cutting 6 1/2 inch squares. So this works out really, really well. I can just get that white line running right up that gap between the square motifs there. I can cut it, turn around, cut the other way so that I get a 6 1/2 inch strip that is centered really well on that gap between the motifs.
Yes.
Then I can turn my strip this way, and I can center that line up and down again and make sure I'm straight on my strip as well. See, my edge is straight here. And then make sure I've got it where I want it. I can cut and make sure I'm straight. There, got that right down the middle, and cut again. There we go. We have this square that has this
Looks like
sort
you
of
pieced
cross
it
in the
that
middle.
way.
Exactly, that's the idea. So we just need 4 of those. Once you have those cut and once you have your nice long strips pieced together, it is time to get out those circles. I'm going to talk about 2 different ways to applique these. So when I initially talked about cutting these out, I had you cut them just right on that line, which is going to be perfect for doing a raw edge applique. You're going to want to get some sort of a fusible web. We used this Easy Steam 2. It is a pressure sensitive one. Comes on a little bolt like this. And we went with that one because it's really, really tacky. So getting these, because we have this whole line of them, getting them lined up in the right spot and getting them stuck down, it was really nice to have this stuff that's really nice and tacky. So you can take your circles that you've already cut out, lay out your fusible web. If it's one that has paper on both sides, you'll need to peel that back. Put those down on there. Make sure you have either your applique pressing sheet or that paper that you peeled off. Works really well for, you put down your fabric circles. You can put this back over the top of it to protect your iron and press those. You will have to trim around your circles again to get them out of the rest of your fusible. You can hear how tacky that stuff is. It's really nice. So now I've got a circle with a fusible on the back. Peel it off, and this is the flowers with the pink centers are the ones that are going to go on the purple strips. And these get centered in between the square motifs. So on our strip, we've got these square motifs and this gap right in the middle. That just gets put right about there. And it doesn't have to be super precise. This is such busy fabric. There's a lot going on in this quilt. All of it is beautiful. So if it's not exactly centered, it's not the end of the world. It's gonna be just fine. No one will ever know. You can see how tacky that particular fusible is, which is really nice. Yeah, so there's that. We're then gonna come back along and we decided to go with this blanket stitch around it using this dark purple thread. I think it looks awesome. Patrice was helping me with that. She does such a beautiful, beautiful job. We've got that. You can use whatever stitch you'd like. If you wanted to just do a straight stitch around there, you could. I personally like the look of the blanket stitch. I think it kind of has...
So it adds to the flower.
Exactly, yeah. So that's doing the raw edge applique. Now, if you did want to have a little bit more finished edge on that applique, you can do a turned edge applique. So if you can still do that even if you've already cut your circles out exactly on the line. I'm going to show you a little trick here. Your circles might be a little bit smaller than they would otherwise be, but it's totally fine. So what we've done is we've taken just some really, really lightweight stabilizer and put our circle, you can see that's our circle, put it face down, right side down on that lightweight stabilizer, stitched a really scant, just like 1/8 of an inch or so seam allowance around there. And then just cut a little slit in the stabilizer so that you can get into it and turn the whole thing right side out. Here you can use a point turner or something like that if you can't quite get all those edges smooth. Run it along the inside of those edges and you have this beautiful circle with the edges turned under. You don't even have to think about, and you don't have to try to carefully fold each edge under as you go along. You've got that. And from there, you can either use just a little glue stick or something to put it on your strips. So these ones are gonna go, flowers with the yellow centers like this, gonna go on the blue striped fabric. And we decided to use the same thread on that because we are stitching that down. That dark purple thread around there as well. But
very nice.
It looks really good. I'm really excited about how this is coming together. I hope that's helpful for you. Of course, as always, you can reach out to us if you have any questions. We're more than happy to help. And don't worry if you're not to this point on your quilt yet. We just wanted to make sure that these resources were available to people who are really going to town on Brave, but take your time, don't stress about it, and have fun with the process. And we will be back soon to finish putting this quilt together. Happy sewing.